The grand hall of the Stellar Council was cold and silent. Dozens of alien nobles stood in shining armor, their glowing eyes fixed on the tall figure walking through the middle. The air shimmered with tension, and at the center of it all stood Princess Ilara of the Vanir Empire, her pale silver skin trembling slightly under her ceremonial robes. It had been years since she last felt fear, yet the man walking toward her made her heart race like it did when she was a child hiding in the ruins of war. The human stepped forward slowly, wearing a simple black uniform, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He didn't bow, didn't speak, just stood there, a quiet, unreadable human. The council whispered in disbelief. A human? Here, someone hissed, what madness is this? Ilara swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had seen humans only in records, old transmissions of their wars, their burning worlds, and their unyielding courage. But this one felt different. There was something about his eyes, something that made her heart ache with a memory she couldn't place. The Supreme Chancellor's voice broke the silence. Captain Reed of Earth's Defense Command, he announced. You stand before the Council to negotiate peace terms. The human nodded slightly. His voice calm. Peace is possible, he said. If both sides remember what mercy once looked like. Ilara's fingers twitched. That voice, it struck something deep inside her. A memory flashed, broken and buried under years of pain, a battlefield, smoke, fire, and a small human soldier lifting her from the rubble. He had whispered, You'll be safe now, little one, before disappearing into the chaos. Her breathing grew shallow. Her vision blurred for a moment. Could it be him? Could the same human who once carried her out of the flames now stand before her as an envoy of Earth? The council continued to debate. Their words blurring into noise. Ilara couldn't hear them, her thoughts spinning out of control. She remembered the warmth of that soldier's jacket around her tiny body, the way he smiled despite his wounds. She had never seen him again. She thought he died when the war ended, but now... Captain Reed turned his gaze toward her, his expression unreadable but his eyes soft for just a second. And in that moment she knew. It was him. The man who had saved her life when she was just a frightened child. Ilara's voice trembled, almost a whisper. You, she said. I remember you. The council turned in shock. Reed blinked, confusion crossing his face for a heartbeat before understanding dawned in his eyes. The quiet hall filled with murmurs, gasps, and disbelief. The Chancellor frowned. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. But Ilara ignored him. Stepping closer, her eyes glistened, her lips trembling. I thought you were gone, she said. I never even knew your name. Reed's voice was low, filled with quiet strength. Names didn't matter then, he said. Only survival did. The guard shifted uneasily. Their hands on their weapons, the tension grew thicker. Like a storm before lightning, for the first time in centuries, a human stood before the alien empire not as an enemy, but as something else and a ghost from their past, a memory that refused to die. Ilara's trembling hands fell to her side. Her people might hate humanity. Her council might despise them, but she couldn't. Not when the man who had once saved her stood before her again. Breathing proof that mercy still existed, the meeting ended with chaos. The council demanded the human's removal. But Ilara stood firm, her voice cold but determined. He stays, she said, her gaze never leaving Reed, and in that moment, the fate of two civilizations began to shift. Not because of politics or power, but because a princess remembered the human who once saved her life. The next morning, the Stellar Council chamber buzzed with fury. Every noble, warrior, and delegate demanded answers. A human standing before them was an insult. They said a danger, a reminder of old scars. Yet the princess sat still, her silver eyes calm but her mind storming inside. Captain Reed waited quietly at the edge of the hall, guarded by two towering Vanirian soldiers whose hands never left their plasma spears. He looked tired but unshaken, his posture steady, the kind that came from years of facing war and impossible odds. He had stood before alien cannons before, and he could do it again. The Chancellor slammed his fist on the table. This is unacceptable, he growled. The human alliance is not to be trusted. Their fleets once burned half our colonies. Ilara's voice, soft but clear, cut through the noise. And yet, she said, when I was a child, one of them saved me. The words dropped into the chamber like a meteor. Silence followed, long and sharp. Every alien eye turned toward her. Disbelief twisting their features, even Reed looked stunned. Though he said nothing, Alara stood, her robes glimmering in the pale light. My father's palace fell during the First Contact War, she said. Our armies failed, the city burned, and I— Her voice faltered for a heartbeat. I would not be standing here if not for a human soldier who carried me out of the flames. Her hand shook slightly, but she didn't stop. That soldier is standing here today. Gasps filled the room. The Chancellor rose, his voice full of anger. You mean to tell us that you owe your life to one of them? Ilara nodded slowly. Yes, she said. And I will not hide it any longer. Reed finally spoke, his tone calm but edged with steel. I didn't know who she was, he said. To me, she was just a child who needed saving. The counselors murmured, some in awe, some in disgust. They could not understand how a human, a creature of war and destruction, could show mercy to one of their own. Ilara stepped down from her throne and walked closer to him. Every step echoed in the hall like a drumbeat of defiance. When she stopped before him, she looked up, her eyes shimmering with an emotion Reed couldn't quite read. Why did you save me? She asked quietly. Reed's answer came without hesitation. Because no child should die in a war made by adults. The words pierced through the room like light breaking through a storm. For a brief moment, even the hardest hearts in the council softened. But the Chancellor's voice rose again, louder than before. This changes nothing, he shouted. A human cannot be trusted, mercy or not. He turned to the guards. Take him to the detention wing until further notice. The guards moved forward, but before they could touch him, Ilara raised her hand. No, she said firmly. He is under royal protection. Gasps rippled again. Royal protection was no small thing. It was a sacred command that even the Chancellor could not easily overturn. The guards hesitated, looking between the two, unsure whom to obey. Reed remained still, his eyes on her, his jaw tight with restrained emotion. The Chancellor's tone grew venomous. You risk war for one man, he hissed. Ilara met his glare without fear. If peace must begin with one act of mercy, then let it begin with him, she said. The hall erupted again. Voices rising in chaos. Reed turned slightly, his expression unreadable but deep inside. A strange feeling stirred, gratitude mixed with sorrow. He had not expected to see her again, let alone have her defend him before her people. The child he once saved now stood as a princess, shielding him with her crown. Later, as the council dispersed in anger and confusion, Ilara walked the corridors alone, her thoughts heavy. The image of Reed carrying her through the flames haunted her mind. She had never forgotten the warmth of his arms or the sound of his voice telling her she would live. Now seeing him again, older, scarred but alive, something deep inside her began to awaken in his chamber. Reed sat by the window overlooking the alien skyline. The stars here were strange but beautiful. He wondered how many years had passed for her, how much she had endured. He had saved many lives in his career, but hers had changed his own. And somewhere deep in the palace walls, unseen eyes watched them both. A shadowy figure whispered into a communicator. The princess protects the human, the voice said. Holden sharp. This could undo everything. Outside, thunder rumbled across the alien sky. The storm was only beginning. Night fell over the shining spires of the Vanir capital. The city glowed like silver fire under the twin moons. But inside the royal palace, darkness moved quietly through the corridors. Servants whispered of betrayal, of secret meetings, of those who would never allow a human to stand beside their princess. Ilara sat alone in her private chamber, staring at the stars beyond the glass dome. She should have felt safe there, but she didn't. Her heart was restless, her thoughts circling back to the man now confined under her protection. Captain Reed, the human who had once carried her through the smoke and fire of war, now sat only a few walls away. The memory of his calm eyes refused to leave her mind. She remembered being a child, clutching his blood-stained jacket. The way his rough voice had told her she'd be fine. Back then he was just a nameless soldier, a stranger from a world her people feared. Now, he was the key to a fragile peace, or the spark of another war. A soft hiss sounded near her door. A shadow slipped in, cloaked in black armor with the symbol of the Imperial Guard. Your Highness, the voice whispered. The council has met in secret. Ilara's gaze hardened. What have they decided? The guard hesitated before speaking. They planned to remove the human envoy tonight quietly. Her blood ran cold. Remove? She whispered, though she already knew what that meant. Assassination. the word no one dared speak aloud. Alara stood quickly, her robe flowing like liquid light. "Who leads this plan?" she demanded. The guard's voice dropped lower. "The Chancellor himself, with support from the High War Council. They say it's for the safety of the Empire." Alara's pulse quickened, her mind racing. Reed had come in peace. And yet her own people were planning to murder him. She clenched her hands, anger flickering like lightning behind her calm face. "No," she said softly but firmly. "They will not touch him." Without hesitation, she turned and strode toward the lower halls where Reed was kept. The guard tried to stop her. "Your Highness." "It's dangerous," he said. She didn't answer. Her heart had already decided down below. Reed sat in the quiet cell reserved for guests of questionable trust. The walls shimmered faintly with energy. He wasn't chained, but he knew he was being watched. Still, he didn't feel anger, only sadness. He had seen enough wars to know how fear could twist good hearts into hatred. When the door opened, he expected a guard. Not her. Alara stepped in, her presence soft but commanding. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick with memories, then she said quietly, "They plan to kill you tonight." Reed blinked. Calm but alert. "I thought as much," he said, his tone steady. Fear always finds a blade. Her chest tightened at his words. "You saved me once," she said, "and now I must save you." Reed stood slowly, his gaze fixed on hers. "You don't owe me anything." "Princess," he said, but she shook her head. "It's not debt," she whispered, "it's choice." For the first time, Reed saw something beyond duty in her eyes, something fragile and human despite her alien grace. "Then what's your plan?" he asked. Alara took a breath. "There's an old passage through the Undercity. It leads to the outer ports. You can reach your ship before dawn." Reed frowned. "And what will happen to you?" Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Let them think I helped a fugitive. I'd rather face their anger than live with their blood on my conscience." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then we leave together," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "Together?" "Yes," he replied. "If I run alone, they'll call me a traitor if you vanish too. They'll hesitate. They'll search for answers before they start another war." For a heartbeat, she stared at him, torn between duty and instinct. Then she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "Together, outside." The corridor stirred with motion, the sound of armored boots echoing closer. The assassins were already coming. Alara grabbed his hand, cold and trembling. "This way," she said, pulling him toward a hidden panel behind the tapestry. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into darkness. They descended quickly, the air growing colder and damp above them. Shouts echoed. The guards had found the empty cell. Reed glanced back once. "Your people won't forgive this easily," he said. Alara didn't look back. "I'm not doing this for forgiveness," she replied. "I'm doing it because it's right." Their footsteps faded into the ancient tunnels as the palace erupted in chaos. And far above, the Chancellor stood on the balcony, his eyes burning with fury as he received the report. "The princess has escaped with the human," a soldier stammered. The old alien's voice was like poison. "Then send the hunters," he said, "and bring them both back alive." The stars outside flickered as if the universe itself held its breath. For the first time in centuries, an alien princess and a human soldier fled side by side, not as enemies but as something far more dangerous, allies. The air beneath the palace was heavy and cold. Ancient stones glistened with moisture as Alara and Reed moved through the narrow tunnels, their steps echoing softly. Dim blue crystals along the walls gave off a faint glow, just enough light to see the path. Every sound felt louder than it should, every heartbeat a thunder inside their chests. Alara kept her hand on the wall, counting turns. She had been here once as a child, guided by her nurse during the war back then. She never knew where these tunnels led. Now they were her only hope of saving a man who had once saved her. Behind them, faint metallic sounds grew closer. The hunters were coming, armored soldiers with scanners that could track heat and movement. Reed slowed for a moment, checking the small pulse pistol at his side. It was an old human model, worn but reliable. Alara glanced at it nervously. "You think that will stop them?" She whispered. Reed gave a half smile. "It won't need to. Just slow them down." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Ancient and hollow, strange carvings covered the walls, glowing faintly like living veins. Alara stopped, her breath catching. "These markings, They're not Venerian, she said, running her fingers across the symbols. Reed studied them carefully. They look older than both our species, he murmured. Like something left before the wars. A soft hum filled the air. The symbols pulsed brighter, reacting to their presence. Suddenly, the floor lit up with lines of blue light, forming a path deeper into the chamber. Ilara looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Should we follow it? Reed nodded slowly. Maybe it wants us to, he said. They walked cautiously down the glowing path. The air shimmered around them like walking through a dream. Whispers echoed in the distance, faint, ancient voices that neither could understand. Then the path ended before a tall, circular doorway covered in crystalline dust. It opened with a soft hiss, revealing a small transport dock hidden beneath the capital. Reed exhaled in disbelief. This isn't a tunnel, he said. It's an escape port. Ilara's eyes widened. My ancestors must have built it during the old wars. A secret way out for the royal family. She moved toward a silver and black shuttle resting on a magnetic platform. It looked ancient but intact. Reed brushed a hand across the hull. Human tech, he whispered. Old Terran design, Ilara froze. Human? Yes, he said, frowning. This is pre-war construction. How did this end up here? Before they could think further, a sharp sound echoed behind them. The hunters had found the entrance. Red beams sliced through the dark. Run, Reed said calmly, pulling her toward the shuttle. She jumped inside while he activated the control panel, the system groaning to life with flickering light. Energy surged through the dock as engines whined. The wall shook with the first blast from the pursuing soldiers. The gate began to open slowly, revealing the vast blackness of the void beyond. Ilara gripped the co-pilot's chair, her hands trembling. Will it fly? She asked. Reed grinned faintly. Only one way to find out. The shuttle lifted with a deep rumble. Hunters poured into the chamber below, firing plasma shots that burst against the hull. Reed pushed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, then shot through the gate like a comet leaving a dying star. They burst into the night sky, the capital shrinking beneath them. For the first time in her life, Ilara saw her world from above. Vast oceans of silver mist and floating citadels shining like stars. But the beauty was short-lived. Behind them, Venerian interceptors appeared, sleek and deadly. They're locking on, Reed said, hand steady on the controls. Can we outrun them? Ilara asked. He shook his head. Not in open space, we need cover. Head. The scanner beeped faintly. A dense nebula storm filled with magnetic clouds and ancient debris. Reed's eyes narrowed. There, he said, pointing. If we reach the void storm, they'll lose our signal. Ilara looked out. The swirling mass looked alive, glowing with violet light and streaks of lightning. It looks dangerous, she whispered. Reed smiled without humor. Everything worth surviving is. The ship dived into the storm, lightning flashing around them like gods in battle. The Venerian ships followed, but their scanners began to fail, their formation breaking apart in the chaos. Reed fought the controls, the shuttle shaking violently. Alarms screaming. Ilara held onto the seat, her eyes wide but fearless. You trust me? He shouted over the noise. She met his gaze. I always did, she said softly. The ship spun through waves of energy and vanished into the deep shadow of the nebula. Behind them, the hunters searched the storm, finding nothing but silence. The human and the alien princess were gone, lost to the void far away in the palace above. The chancellor received the report with cold fury. They escaped, the soldier said, trembling. The chancellor's expression darkened. Then we'll bring the entire fleet, he hissed. The galaxy will know what happens to those who betray the Empire. But deep inside the storm, Reed's ship drifted in strange light, and in that light, Ilara saw something moving, an ancient structure hidden within the clouds, a city of metal and stars sleeping for centuries. Waiting, Reed stared at it, disbelief flooding his eyes. That's impossible, he whispered. Ilara looked at him. What is it? Reed's voice dropped to a whisper. Filled with awe, it's human, he said. A lost colony. The stars flickered and destiny changed its course again. The storm slowly cleared around the shuttle, revealing a sight neither Ilara nor Reed could have imagined. A massive structure hung in the void, half hidden inside the nebula clouds. It was not a city made by aliens but by humans, ancient and broken yet still alive with faint blue light. Its towers stretched like the ribs of a sleeping giant, its core pulsing like a heart that refused to die. Alara pressed her face to the window, eyes wide with wonder. Is this your people's work? She whispered. Reed nodded slowly, his throat tight. Yes, he said. But this isn't on any map. Not even in our archives. The ship drifted closer, guided by automatic signals that seemed to awaken as they approached. A soft voice echoed through the cockpit, mechanical, gentle and human. Unidentified vessel. Welcome home. Alara looked at Reed in shock. It knows you, she said. Reed exhaled slowly. Or it remembers someone like me. They followed the glowing beacon lights into a landing bay filled with dust and silence. As the engines cooled, Reed stood, his hands trembling slightly. He had fought in dozens of worlds, but nothing felt like this, returning to a ghost of humanity's forgotten past. Alara followed him out, her silver robe fluttering in the still air. The hangar smelled of metal and age, yet the walls shimmered faintly with life. Lights flickered on as they walked deeper. Holographic panels blinked awake, showing ancient human faces, old messages, names of families long gone. One panel played a faint recording. This is Haven Station, a woman's voice said. Last refuge after the Exodus War. We remain in hiding until the stars are safe again. Then the message ended. Leaving silence thick as smoke, Alara looked at Reed. Confusion in her voice. Exodus War? Reed frowned. That's not in any official record, he said.
They erased it. They reached a central chamber filled with cryopods, thousands of them arranged like stars in a frozen sky.
Each pod contained a human sleeping peacefully untouched by time. Alara gasped softly. They're alive, she whispered. Reed's voice broke slightly. They've been here for centuries. A small maintenance drone floated near them, its lights flickering weakly when it spoke. Its tone was almost childlike. Primary commander detected, it said to Reed, scanning his face. DNA pattern 92% matched to Earthline command registry. Reed blinked. I don't understand, he said. That system was lost 200 years ago. Alara placed her hand gently on his arm. Maybe you were meant to find this, she said softly. Reed stared at the sleeping humans, feeling the weight of history pressing against his heart. Maybe, he whispered, or maybe humanity never truly left. Suddenly, the station's lights dimmed. A deep hum filled the chamber as ancient systems powered up. A large holographic figure appeared before them, a woman in an old Earth uniform. Her eyes shimmered with static light. Command authorization detected, she said. Reactivation sequence initiated. Alara stepped back, startled. What is happening? Reed watched the hologram closely. She's an AI, he said quietly. A guardian. The hologram turned its gaze toward him. Humanity scattered but never perished, it said. This colony waited for a signal of peace, for the day when humans and others could stand together without fear. It paused, scanning Alara. And you, Alien Royal, your presence confirms the prophecy encoded in our archives. Alara's voice trembled. What prophecy? The AI's tone softened. That one day, the child saved by human hands would return with that same hand to awaken the lost. The words struck both of them like lightning. Alara's knees weakened. The child. Me? She whispered. Reed turned to her slowly, realization dawning in his eyes. The prophecy was about you, he said, and about this moment. The AI's light dimmed as power levels dropped again. Energy critical, it said. Choose, awaken the sleepers. Or preserve the station. Reed looked at Alara. Torn. If we wake them, the storm will draw every signal in the sector. The Vanir will find us, he said. Alara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the fear. Then let them come, she said. The galaxy deserves to see what humanity truly was. Reed nodded slowly. He walked toward the control console, hands trembling but firm. Then let's wake them, he said. He pressed the activation rune and light flooded the chamber. Cryopods hissed open one by one, warm air filling the space. For the first time in centuries, humans breathed again beneath alien stars. Alara stood beside him, watching faces awaken. Men, women, children, all blinking at the strange new world. Reed looked at her, his voice soft. You realize what this means, he said. She nodded slowly, eyes shining. Yes, she said. It means the galaxy will never be the same again. But far above them, the nebula storm began to pulse violently. Venerian ships had entered its edge, tracking faint signals, and among them, The Chancellor's warship led the fleet. He looked at the readings, his face dark with rage. "Find them," he growled, "and burn whatever they have awakened." The light of a forgotten world glowed in the storm's heart. And for the first time, humanity's past and future stood side by side. The princess of another world and the soldier of Earth. Together they had awakened something greater than both empires. The storm outside the nebula burned with new light. Dozens of Venerian warships cut through the clouds like blades of fire, their energy cannons ready, their captains eager for vengeance at the center of it all. The Chancellor's dreadnought gleamed like a dark sun. He stared at the holographic map, his voice low and cold. "The princess has betrayed us," he said, "and the human she protects will bring ruin." Inside Haven Station, alarms echoed through ancient corridors. Reed stood at the command console while Alara coordinated the newly awakened humans. The colony had power again, but it was fragile, their shields weak, their weapons half-functional still. The human spirit had reawakened. Engineers rushed to repair generators. Pilots ran to forgotten fighters covered in dust. It felt like history itself was stirring from a long sleep. Alara moved among them, helping where she could. Her royal robe now replaced by a simple flight jacket. Every human who looked at her saw not an alien princess but an ally. A symbol of hope. "Why are you helping us?" one of the engineers asked quietly. Alara smiled faintly. "Because a human once helped me," she said. Reed turned toward her, his expression calm but his voice sharp. "The Vanir fleet is entering the outer ring," he said. "We have maybe 20 minutes." Alara's gaze turned toward the viewing screen, a swirling field of lightning and ships moving like shadows. "Can we hold them?" she asked. Reed exhaled. "If we fight, maybe for a while. If we run, maybe longer. But if we stand together, we change everything." The command deck trembled as the first impact struck the outer shield. The sleeping giant had been found, and the war it once escaped was waking again. Reed barked orders, his calm voice turning sharp like a commander born for this. "Activate point defense, reroute power to shields, and get those interceptors online." From the hangars, old human fighters launched into the storm, their engines screaming with new life, tiny against the Venerian dreadnoughts, but fierce like sparks defying a hurricane. Alara watched them with wide eyes. "So few," she whispered. Reed nodded. "Sometimes few is enough." The human ships darted between enemy lines, their movements chaotic and unpredictable. The Venerians were used to order, to precision, but not to human improvisation. Within minutes, 2 enemy cruisers collided trying to track them. Reed smiled faintly. "Chaos is our oldest weapon," he said. But the Chancellor was no fool. "Focus fire on the station," he commanded. "They cannot protect it forever." A storm of plasma beams cut through the void. Slamming into Haven's shields, the station shook violently, systems sparking, corridors collapsing. People screamed, but no one ran. For the first time in centuries, humanity was fighting again, not for conquest, but for survival. Alara grabbed the railing, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Reed, the core is overloading," she said. He looked at the readings, his jaw tightening. "If that core goes critical, the whole station will burn." She met his gaze, her tone firm. "Then we have to use it," Reed frowned. "Use it?" "Yes," she said. "The storm outside reacts to energy. If we overload the core at the right moment, it could release a wave strong enough to disable every ship in the sector." Reed stared at her. "It could also kill us all." She nodded slowly. "Peace always costs something." He hesitated only a moment, then gave a grim smile. "Then let's make it count." They moved together through the trembling corridors toward the energy core. Around them, humans and Vanir both fought in close quarters as boarding pods crashed through the walls. Reed's pistol fired precise bursts, while Alara used her wrist field to deflect incoming shots. They fought side by side, soldier and princess, human and alien, against the weight of history itself. At the core chamber, light pulsed like a living heart. Reed accessed the old controls. His fingers moving fast, Alara stood beside him, entering override codes from the royal encryption matrix she had secretly memorized. The system recognized both human command and Venerian royal. The AI's voice filled the room again. "Dual authority confirmed, initializing energy resonance." Reed looked at her one last time. "When this is over," he said softly, "what happens next?" She smiled sadly. "Maybe the galaxy will finally remember that mercy is stronger than fear." The floor vibrated as the core surged. light spilling out like a second sun. Outside, the storm twisted violently, absorbing the wave. And then it burst. A brilliant explosion of energy rippling across space. Every Venerian ship was struck by the pulse. Engines dying, systems freezing, weapons shutting down. The Chancellor's dreadnought drifted powerless, its bridge engulfed in silent light. He slammed his fists against the console. What have they done? He screamed, but there was no answer. Inside Haven Station, silence fell. The humans and Alara stood among flickering lights, waiting for the end that never came. The core stabilized. Its overload redirected into the storm. They were alive. Reed fell against the console, exhausted but smiling. It worked, he said quietly. Alara stepped closer, her eyes bright with relief and awe. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We did. Outside, the storm cleared, revealing hundreds of disabled ships drifting peacefully. No more firing, no more hate, only silence and light. For the first time in generations, the galaxy was quiet. The storm had faded into calm light across the void. The broken Venerian fleet drifted in silence, powerless but alive. The endless thunder of war had finally stopped, replaced by the quiet hum of a galaxy holding its breath. Inside Haven Station, engineers and soldiers moved through the corridors slowly, as if afraid to speak too loudly and break the fragile peace. Smoke curled from damaged panels and sparks still danced in the air. Yet the feeling that filled the halls was not despair but awe. They had survived together, human and alien, side by side. Reed stood on the main deck, his uniform torn, his hands blackened with soot beside him. Alara stared at the holographic window that showed the sleeping storm beyond. Her silver eyes reflected the light of the stars, calm yet filled with a strange sadness. We stopped them, she whispered. Reed nodded slowly. For now, he said, but what comes next will matter even more. A soft tone came from the console. The AI's voice returned, faint but clear. Signal transmission available, connection open to all frequencies. Alara looked at Reed. This is our chance, she said. He nodded once. Then let's make the galaxy listen. The transmission began, reaching every ship, every world still within the nebula's reach. The screens flickered alive across the Venerian dreadnoughts and human stations, scattered through deep space. On them appeared the image of a human soldier standing beside a silver-skinned princess. Reed spoke first, his voice steady and deep. This war ends today, he said. We have both shed enough blood. He looked at Alara, who stepped forward and spoke softly but with power that echoed through every signal. The Vanir were taught that humans were monsters, and humans were told that we were tyrants, she said. But today, we proved both wrong. The message spread like light through darkness on one of the crippled Venerian ships. Officers watched in silence, their hands trembling. On Earth's frontier stations, soldiers paused their weapons and stared in disbelief. Across the stars, a strange new feeling began to stir. Curiosity instead of hatred, respect instead of fear. Back on Haven Station, Reed deactivated the transmission. The silence that followed felt heavy but peaceful. Alara exhaled slowly. Do you think they'll believe us? She asked. Reed smiled faintly. They don't have to believe, he said. They just have to see. Moments later, the AI sensors lit up. Venerian flagship requesting communication, it said. Alara hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. The holographic screen shimmered and the image of the Chancellor appeared. Older, weary but no longer filled with rage. His voice was low, almost human in its exhaustion. You spared our fleet when you could have destroyed it, he said slowly. Why? Alara stepped closer to the projection. Because mercy is stronger than victory, she replied. The Chancellor looked at her for a long moment, then turned his gaze toward Reed. And the human? He asked. Reed answered simply, I fight for peace, not revenge. The old alien's eyes softened. Perhaps we have forgotten what that means, he said quietly. We will withdraw our forces. The screen faded. Leaving silence once more, Alara lowered her head, relief washing through her. It's over, she whispered. Reed shook his head slightly. It's beginning, he said. Days passed, repairs began, not just to the station but to trust itself. Venerian engineers worked beside human technicians, learning, laughing, rebuilding. Children from both species met for the first time without fear. The old hatred that had ruled the stars began to melt like frost under a new sunrise. Alara often stood at the observation deck, watching the nebula swirl beyond the glass. Reed would sometimes join her, both silent for long moments. He finally asked one evening, "Do you regret it? Leaving your throne, your world?" She smiled softly. "No," she said. "I found something greater than a crown." He raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Her voice was quiet, almost like a sigh. "Purpose," she said, "and maybe faith." The AI's voice interrupted gently. "Haven Station now fully operational. All cryo-civilians stable." Reed looked toward the long halls filled with newly awakened humans. A future waited for them now, a galaxy no longer divided by fear. Ilara turned to him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "What will you do, Captain?" He thought for a moment, then smiled. "Stay," he said. "Humanity started this story, but it's time we write it together." Outside, the nebula began to fade, revealing stars brighter than before. The human colony drifted quietly, surrounded by ships that once came as enemies but now floated as allies. From the darkness of war, a new alliance had been born, one built not by empires but by two souls who refused to repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. Ilara reached out, placing her hand gently over Reed's. For a long time, neither spoke. They just watched the dawn rise over the endless sea of stars, and somewhere far away on 100 different worlds, children would one day learn a story, the tale of a princess who trusted a human, and a soldier who remembered mercy, a story that changed the galaxy forever.